Speakeasy with me, Luqman Haris.
And me, Rozina Aziz.
My co-anchor is, of course, Rozina, the co-founder and CEO of Metamorphosa, a former news, media and corporate woman who now mentors, coaches, trains and consults global leaders and entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Luqman. Today we'll have a conversation on leading a technopreneurial ecosystem. First, an introduction on our guest.
Rafiza Ghazali attended Tunku Cruciah College before gaining a bachelor's degree in science economics from the London School of Economics and Political Science and a postgraduate diploma in strategy and innovation from the Said Business School at the University of Oxford. Rafiza had a 26-year career in the public and private sectors across diverse industries, focusing on strategy, innovation, finance and business development. In June of 2020, she was appointed the Group CEO of Cradle Fund. Having successfully implemented programs ranging from technology-based innovations, corporate startup partnerships to organizational transformation and restructuring, Rafiza is now tasked with setting and implementing strategies for a world-class ecosystem for early-stage technology entrepreneurs. She will be focused on growing their GDP contribution from 3.9 billion ringgit in 2019 to 30.8 billion ringgit of Malaysia's GDP by 2030.
Rafiza, welcome to Leader Speakeasy with Luqman and Rozina. We look forward to our conversation with you today. How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
We'll kick off by discussing your leadership mantra.
Rafiza, the global debate on whether leaders are born or bred is an age-old one. Personally, what's your own experience and point of view on this? Was there a turning point that inspired you to transition to becoming a leader?
Well, my personal view is that I believe leaders are more bred than born. I used to think leaders are born with. You see a group of kids, there's always one or two that stands out, right? But having gone through a number of crises, especially the recent one, the pandemic, there are subtle characteristics which I believe which makes a great leader. A lot of people always think that leaders need to be extrovert, charismatics, but the leaders that I find that went through the pandemic are the ones that have these characteristics like empathy, humility, and really take accountable of things. And you really see their true leadership skills during a crisis. So I've got a couple of people that I coach at work and I see. And so I really believe leadership can really be nurtured, and especially if you put in the right environment.
So you are in Team Bred. Being in a leadership position, of course, has its perks. But in the last 2 years, leaders were faced with unprecedented challenges during the pandemic, forcing them to constantly evaluate and change or pivot the course of their own leadership and the organizations that they lead. So during that period, Rafiza, what was your main source of motivation? You know, the very thing that energizes you to wake up every morning and get out there to get things done.
Before I became a CEO, I always thought that, wow, being a CEO, that must be amazing. But after having that responsibility, it's not very easy. You are carrying a lot of people, you're supporting a lot of people. And during, when I took over this position, and it was in the middle of pandemic, and I really need to motivate my team. To me, they're very important. What motivates me personally is seeing that they succeed. I always believe in, making sure that my success comes from the people around me, making sure that they enjoy coming to work. I think that motivates me.
Yeah, motivation is just a starting point, however. With technological disruptions, ever-changing customer preferences and habits, tough business challenges and much, much more, leaders need to be resilient and drive their vision during times of uncertainty. So broadly, what has been your guiding leadership mantra and your core leadership strengths?
To me, it's all about talking to different people, because I always believe as a leader, you need to serve the stakeholders around you. You need, in my case, as a CEO of Cradle, I serve the entrepreneurs out there. I serve my staff. I serve the government. I serve my board of directors. So it's all about making sure that I remain relevant and I fit the purpose why I'm holding this position. That's all leadership is all about. People look at you in making decisions. People rely on you. A lot of entrepreneurs out there really rely on the things that Cradle can bring to them. So to me, that's very key in taking over this role. So it's all about, responsibility and making sure that things happen.
Right, Rafiza, moving on to the next segment, we want to understand how you lead the dynamic development of a world-class ecosystem to help grow early startup or early stage entrepreneurs.
So as a corporate leader with cross-industry background in strategy, finance, audits, and business development, amongst others, many observers saw you as a surprise choice for Group CEO of Cradle Fund, which positions itself as Malaysia's leading early-stage tech-based company's influencer, whose mission is to create an ecosystem that supports a strong and innovative business-building environment for technology entrepreneurs and innovators. So without personal entrepreneurial or deep tech experience yourself, how did you define your leadership role and contribution to Cradle Fund and the technopreneurs that you seek to help grow?
When I first came upon this opportunity to lead Cradle, right? And for me, I always believe being a successful entrepreneur is all about making sure that your technology is wanted. So I believe mentioned earlier, Luqman, I've got 26 years of working experience. I've worked in a very wide range of industry. At Sime Darby, I look at plantation, property, automotive. So I come from a perspective of a user. It's all about what the customer wants. So I always challenge the entrepreneurs out there. Is your product, your services, your delivery, can they make people's life easier, cheaper? Can your technology makes the process flow faster, cheaper and quicker? If you can't do that, then you're in trouble. Because from the customer's perspective, when I was looking at technology that helps to disrupt the industry that I was with, those are the key things that I always look upon whether or not I want to use the technology. So I believe, coming from different background really helps me to really sit down with the entrepreneur.
So you took over in June 2020. During the very first CMCO, Cradle Fund had tragically lost the former CEO 2 years earlier, and an interim CEO held the fort during a time of both sadness and also uncertainty. So upon taking over, what was your most critical challenge, and what were your 3 most important strategies in those early days to bring Cradle Fund into the next phase?
Like any other leader, you can't do it alone. You need a strong support system around you. So I think that was the biggest challenge that I have, not being able to face-to-face, leading a team, through computer, through telephone. I think to me that was the difficult part. But Alhamdulillah, I'm very lucky. I'm in a position where I have really strong team that supported me. The first thing that I needed to do is to really find out what are the gaps out there in an ecosystem. How can we support the entrepreneurs? What are the resources that I have to really bring Cradle at a different level, and really convince the stakeholders that Cradle has got what it takes to deliver those mandates. I think those are the 3 main things. So after being in this position for 16 months, so you've seen that there's been a number of mandate and thrust given to Cradle to help to really build the ecosystem.
So the Malaysian digital economy is forecast to grow from a 19.1% contribution to GDP in 2019 to 25.5% by 2025. So the government has put in place the My Digital initiative, which includes the Malaysian Digital Economy Blueprint, to complement national development policies such as the 12th Malaysia Plan and Vision for Shared Prosperity 2030.
The ecosystem for digital businesses and entrepreneurs seem complex, with many agencies involved, including MDEC, Meranti, which includes Magic, the Halal Development Corporation, SME Corp, among many others.
And following the latest budget announcement, there were even calls for distribution of entrepreneurial funds and grants from various agencies to be made more transparent and simple for entrepreneurs and innovators alike. So if Rafiza, if you were to cherry pick from the best global digital and entrepreneurial ecosystems, what are the key success factors needed here in Malaysia? Should and how can our ecosystem be made less complex and more conducive to the players and investors?
Well, Rozina and Luqman, in everything that we do, we need to have real information. We need to have credible, up-to-date information. I give you an example. You go into a restaurant, you want to order something from a menu, and say for example fish and chips, and suddenly they say, oh, it's not there. So it's very simple. We need to make sure that we have the right information so that the entrepreneurs out there can make the decision. It's all about from customers' perspective, and that's the reason why Cradle, with the support from the government through the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation, they came out with this single point of platform where we can gather all information, anything and everything that you need to know on the ecosystem on a single platform, so that from the entrepreneur point of view, they don't have to go through a huge haystack to find that needle. So if you can make the gathering of information easy and less complex for them, I think that's the key for them.
All right, we'll go for a short break. Leaders Speakeasy will be back with the Group CEO of Cradle Fund, Rafiza Ghazali.
Rozina. In 2003 to drive the growth of early stage tech entrepreneurs. Close to 1,000 have received grants and coaching, generated 754 million ringgit in revenues, over 80,000 jobs have been created, and more than 1.3 billion ringgit in private and foreign funds have been raised. Rafiza, since you took over in June 2020, I think quite a number of initiatives have been rolled out, including CIP Ignite and CIP Accelerate, My Hackathon, My Startup Portal, and many others. Share with us the impact, including things like My Hackathon, and whether the winners, the 3 winners, have actually successfully completed the pilot deployment within the 12-month period in 2021.
Well, before I go into that, I just need to share something which is pertinent to my answer. When My Hackathon was first mooted, this was back in June 2020, the idea is to crowdsource solutions, especially that helps with the digitalization and services delivery of the government services. There were a lot of disruptions. But in a typical hackathon, they only come up with solutions, and that's when we give the idea to the government. They can't just give the solutions. We need to support them to build the product as well, and that's where we came up with the 250,000 grant. That made a lot of difference. That made a lot of impact, because they're not just giving the idea, but we actually help and assist and support them to actually build their what they call it, their business solutions. And as we all know, dealing with the government in the past has always tend to be focused on bigger companies. So for the startups, it's just an amazing experience, the fact that they can actually work with the government. So it's a private government startup partnership. Now, 18 winners won what we call it the marathon. So i.e. they come up with the grant as well, and we've spent the last 12 months working with them to actually test their idea. Now, out of that, 5 managed to do that way before the deadline, and they have actually tested out and been accepted by the host ministry or the host agency. And it's something that I don't think without My Hackathon that a lot of startups can have that experience. Yes.
When you look at the success stories among entrepreneurs that Cradle Fund has helped to create or support, especially since June 2020, what are the best success predictors which when you handpick entrepreneurs? How do you create unicorns, decacorns, or hectacorns, or can you?
Yeah, well, not easy, to handpick. You can't predict because otherwise a lot of people will be very rich at the moment.
Yeah.
But I think what I found, the typical traits that I see on successful entrepreneurs, not just successful entrepreneurs, but just very successful people, is that they have this desire to continuously learn and to continuously ask questions. And I see that especially those successful entrepreneurs, they are constantly asking their customers, how can we make our product better? Ask their stakeholders, are their services really relevant? And I always tell the entrepreneur that you need to come up with an idea that your customer cannot do without. If you've got that, then there's a high chance that you're going to be very successful. That's number one. And number two is that your product, you need to make sure the entrepreneur can see that, okay, times and environment and change. Can they pivot to that? So we always say that those who survive are not the strongest, but those that can adapt to the situation. So those are the traits that I see that I believe that they're going to be successful. Yeah.
So you've had quite a bit of success at the Dubai Expo 2021, and I think, like 45 million have been committed or approved funding under your CIP initiatives. I understand you hope to grow the GDP contribution of early stage technopreneurs from 3.9 billion ringgit or 0.28% in 2019 to 30.8 billion ringgit or 2.5% by 2030. So as Group CEO at Cradle Fund, what are the growth strategies you have put in place, and what are the big picture systemic gaps that you feel need to be addressed to ensure success?
Well, those targets that you just mentioned, Rozina, they came out from back on the 18th of November, the Ministry of Science of Technology and Innovation. They launched the Startup Ecosystem Roadmap 2021 to 2030. So there are 16 interventions that came out from this roadmap that we believe that can help to achieve those targets that you mentioned earlier. Cradle has been mandated not just for ourselves, but to work with the other stakeholders in the ecosystem to really bring our ecosystem in Malaysia up, the ranking. At the point in time when the roadmap was done, we were ranked 47. So we target by 2030, we want to bring it up to the top 20. Now, this is very, very important because we believe that startups will be, the startup ecosystem will be the driver to grow our GDP as quickly as that. And so it's very important. And the thing about the startup ecosystem is that it has a trickling effect. It provides jobs, it provides revenue, to the country. And it provides constant opportunity to really create new technology, disruptive technology that we need to have in order to survive. So this is where Cradle, we believe, back in 2003 when Cradle was first set up, it was it was tasked to be a funding agency. I believe at that time, it was very, very relevant, but now we need to be an ecosystem builder. We need to work together with all the rest of the ecosystem players to really drive this building up the startup ecosystem.
Yeah. So briefly, Rafiza, for early stage entrepreneurs interested to seek support and guidance from Cradle Fund to scale and grow, what's your best advice for them?
For them, they need to make sure that their product and services delivery is not just relevant in Malaysia, but in the region and definitely in global even. So you can't just build something that's only relevant to Malaysia. Scalability, market access. A lot of people talk about funding, but you need to have a wide customer base first. If you have the right recipe, funding will come to you. So don't worry so much about funding. There are a lot of funding out there, but make sure that your product hits the right target market, and that it can withstand the different time.
Right. That wraps up our main segment, leading a technopreneurial ecosystem.
So Rafiza, we will now move on to the more fun, quick fire questions, more santai. So for each question, you only have 20 seconds to answer.
Right. This is a chance for our viewers to know you up close and personal. So Rosie, take it away.
So, Rafiza, what is the one thing that nobody knows about you?
I love cooking. I know it's not the most interesting, but I really enjoy cooking. I think a lot of people think that it's not her. Yeah, so.
Yeah, that's a good safe one. So Rafiza, you have run marathons before. Share with us briefly your most memorable moment.
My most memorable moment was, I think, it was the New York Marathon, because it was one of the toughest for me. 90% of the time it was wet, it was raining. And I've never seen so many bridges before. So when I finally crossed the line, to me that was the most satisfying of all, because it's one of the toughest of all. And it was really cool. It was, someone being in Malaysia and suddenly you have to run in wet and cold weather. So that was my most satisfying of all.
So, marathon and the New York Marathon aside, what is the craziest thing you have done during your time out from work? Would you do it again?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one without, having to be politically correct, especially in front of television.
She definitely needs more than 20 seconds.
I can't think of, one that would consider crazy.
Yeah, that would make the grade for television that we don't have to cut out afterwards, right?
Yeah.
So, right. So, other than work, I'll give you a pass there. Other than work, what keeps you up at night?
Other than work, I think my kids, my family, making sure that they're protected, they're healthy. My parents, yes, those are the things that keep me at night.
So they say, Rafiza, it is lonely at the top. Does this resonate with you, and why?
Yes, of course. Before becoming a CEO, so I always have my peers. We go out for lunch. But as I become a boss, I find that it's very difficult, especially to have social events, because everyone's wary about you being around. They can't be themselves. So it is lonely at the top. But I really enjoy the work. I love my job.
Rafiza, thanks for joining us. We have just enough time for one quick closing question. Briefly, do you have any parting words?
Yes, I always believe that you need to constantly upgrade yourself, upskill yourself, know what's happening around you. And the most important thing is chill. It's not the end of the world and life is short. Just make the best of it.
So thank you to Rafiza Ghazali, Group CEO of Cradle Fund, for sharing her experience and strategies in leading efforts to develop a world-class technopreneurial ecosystem.
Be sure to join us on Leader Speakeasy with Luqman and Rozina for conversations on leadership as the country and the world strive to bounce back from the pandemic. I'm Luqman Haris.
And I'm Rozina Aziz, wishing you the very best in your career, business and leadership journey. Stay safe, stay resilient.